executive order, I guess, that Biden signed in the last few days, which was basically to investigate supply chain issues for America and how this could affect their local supply of a variety of things. But the focus in this particular case was semiconductor chips. And the reason why that's important is because just about everything has one in them that's electronic. And if they were to suddenly just not be available due to a supply chain shortage, or maybe the supply chain deliberately switches it off, that could have very significant, cause very significant problems for anyone on the receiving end of those goods. And given that, again, those chips are, they're powering us right now through, a couple of devices. They could be in your fridge. They could, and they can go all the way up to, powering transport systems, military. They're everywhere, and there's no real country that can afford to, rely on a supply chain that is, one source focused. And I think that's in realizing that story, and I've been watching a couple of videos about it, that the pandemic kind of highlighted this quite strongly, to the point where there are, some big companies, I think it was GM in the States, that were highlighting that this could be a problem for them, and that they're going to have to do something pretty quick to diversify, and potentially this could lead to more regionalized supply chains, as opposed to, I guess, ones that have traditionally come out of Asia that were set up over the last 40 years.
Well, that's right. I mean, in some regards, I guess it's for those that are fans of the concept, it's a hallmark of the failure of globalization. So the original idea around manufacturing is you shift your manufacturing to a low-cost center, you build up scale with that low-cost center, and then you can just ship it around the world. And it's meant that the car industry in particular works in just in time, so they don't have huge inventories of stock. In fact, as we know anyway, typically even in retail, they don't carry huge inventories of stock anymore. And the idea is that the supply chain just keeps humming along, and you get what you need as you go. And the car makers, in their instance, they got stung by what happened with COVID. Sales fell, they didn't forward order. And because there's only one or two really major chip suppliers globally, now there's a squeeze on supply and there's a shortage, and that's how easily it can happen. But this isn't the only area. Petrochemical refining, so particularly for Australia, for instance, the big Asian centres where petrochemicals are refined now work at a scale and a profitability far in excess of the smaller plants in Australia. So that supply chain is under pressure as we see refineries in Australia close. And you even look to critical minerals, which supply your batteries and a lot of the semiconductor or the chip components. Outside of Asia, the only other place on the planet that has a complete single supply chain for those from minerals through to products is Canada. And, of course, they're not as large as, say, the Asian components. So any disruption, if you're sitting on the other side of the world, can have huge implications. So for a place like Australia now, that idea of diversification and having that self-reliance on supply chains locally, it will become an emerging issue, and it's all come out of COVID.
Well, that is the irony, isn't it? That it took a pandemic to highlight the fact that there were big risks in having this sort of setup, and obviously the last couple of decades, the drive has been to obviously save the buck, because if you, like you said, have those low-cost manufacture centers in Asia punching these things out, it's a way to maximize profits, etc., for companies. But it's now gotten to the point where it was so channeled down into one area that now that this has become a risk to that bottom line in terms of their ability to continue to maximize those profits, etc., and also still continue and survive and be able to supply what they need to supply. An example of this that I thought was quite interesting, and we can probably talk about the Intel story here as well, because we've touched on that previously. But there was, over the last couple of years, there's been a big shift towards, I think it's called TMSC in Taiwan, that has leaped ahead of Intel in terms of technical capability in their process manufacture for chips, and they've become like the go-to place for the chip manufacturer. So Apple, for instance, I think has signed, I'm pretty sure it's like exclusive deals with them to manufacture all their iPhone chips, and presumably the Mac chips that are coming out now as well. Now, I'm sure there may be some residual supply chains that they rely on, but to rely on that one company to produce everything seems like it would be a big risk for them. Just in the sense that they should probably, even if it's the same company, maybe they can, have a location somewhere else, somewhere around the world. Because as I was watching in another video, that, given the issues around China and Taiwan and how that's kind of going, that if that were to go south in some way, that could be, obviously there's, bigger issues at stake with the people involved and everything, but it does have those knock-on effects to supply chains where, if suddenly TMSC doesn't become available in Taiwan anymore, what's Apple going to do in terms of its production of iPhones?
Well, that's an excellent point. And part of the complicating factor is that these plants require huge investment to undertake. But things are different now to how they were 40 years ago when this idea really took off of that sort of globalized manufacturing. And with a lot of the advanced materials now and the processes automated in the manufacture of these chips, the reality is apart from the upfront cost of building the plant, probably the running costs will not be that much different. So there's not really a cost advantage to going to a low-cost centre somewhere else on the planet. So this may be a chance for countries like America, if Biden's serious, to re-establish these industries on American soil. And you would think with the current geopolitical scenarios that are playing out, and also just the shortages and what they mean for business more than anything else, the economics of the situation, we may well start to see things like this. I mean, the other kind of frightening thing is that if we do run out of semiconductors and there's a real squeeze on electronics, then inflation will go through the roof. And and with the current economic situation globally, and zero interest rates today, that could create a really ugly situation in the future.
Absolutely. And not to mention that, like, just from a statistics point of view, if we bring it back to like the workplace and work per se, I don't know. I'd probably have to research. I'd love to look up what the numbers are, but I'd say the vast majority of work now, especially in, I guess, Western democracies, is so reliant on semiconductors that, it would be bad if they suddenly became not available because so much of our work has shifted onto devices that require these things.
Well, I'll give you an added, chill if you want it, Ben. But 10, 15 years ago, toasters and kettles were just electric devices. Now they're electronic devices. They have chips in them.
So I won't be able to cook my toast in the morning. Oh, the world's coming to an end.
I mean, how will it pop up without a chip in there to tell it when to do it?
Exactly. I guess just one final point to wrap it up is I do kind of find it the possibility of regionalizing supply chains and sort of diversifying again, spreading it out to other countries. Even like different countries bringing some of that home could have a potentially beneficial impact on those countries themselves. And I don't know if you'd call it correcting maybe some of the more negative aspects of globalization, maybe, but it might be that doing this assuming, of course, it does happen. I think that's still a big if. Like so much things in the pandemic, there's all this talk about the pandemic's changed everything, but has it? Or are we just going to slip into bad habits again, or the previous habits, should I say? So it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, I think it would be a good thing if this actually happened, and it would just spread some of the load around, I guess.
I completely agree. I mean, it will be interesting to see whether post-COVID humans just fall back into the same short-term bad habits, or whether someone will actually see what we've been through as an opportunity to make the world, or at least their country, a better place.